Okay, we ready to go, Andrea?
Yes.
Okay. The Cuyahoga County Public Works Procurement and Contracting Committee meeting for Wednesday, September 22nd, 2021 will be called to order. Roll call, please.
Good morning, everyone. First, I would like to say, as a reminder to all in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county YouTube page. Calling the roll, Mr. Tuma.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Ms. Conwell.
Present.
Ms. Baker will be here shortly. Mr. Sweeney.
Present.
You have a quorum.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. And is there any public comment before the committee this morning?
No public comment has been submitted, Mr.
Okay.
Chair.
And if I could have approval of minutes from the July 28th, 2021 meeting?
So moved.
Okay, I'll second that. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. And Madam Clerk, if we could have the first matter referred to committee.
Resolution 2021-0195, extending the appointment of Catherine Takachik as Interim Director of the Department of Purchasing.
Okay, and is there somebody to speak on that this morning? If you could just state your name for the record.
Hi, Catherine Takachik, Interim Director of Purchasing. And this is, I guess, to continue my appointment through March of next year as the Interim Director. I took over in June with the creation and separation, really, of the Department of Equity and Inclusion to allow for Lenora to really focus on. I know she's going to give you a good presentation today on what she's been doing in her department. And so I've been serving in the interim role since then, working with the purchasing team to continue to process items and work through the ERP and all of that. And so this would continue my temporary appointment through end of March of next year.
Okay, and so what is the I guess the end goal here? If it's an interim appointment, why not just name you permanent or what have you, or somebody permanent through March of next year? That's a long time to go.
Yeah, so I think right now, I am currently the permanent Chief Innovation and Performance Officer and would look to move back to that after I was done. But I think right now with year end and everything coming up, we didn't want to make another change in the purchasing department. So we wanted to kind of get through the year end process and have some stability in that director role. And then following that, that would allow us to go through advertising the position and find the permanent director for that.
Okay. Any questions from my colleagues? Mr. Sweeney and then Ms. Conwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Interim Director. So basically, you were asked to serve, and you said yes, but you would really prefer to go back to where you were once a new permanent director was hired.
Yeah, I mean, that's my intention. I'm enjoying learning the role, but my background is in doing innovation work, and that's what what I enjoy the most.
Sounds good. I just want to, for the record, and that's your intention, and
Yes.
and that's what your understanding as well with the administration?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, appreciate that. Ms. Conwell.
Through the chair to Catherine, that was going to be my question in regards to what was your background in purchasing?
Learning a lot. So long time working in local government, so I have that background, but still learned a lot already about the purchasing process.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone from the administration who would like to speak to this legislation? Because I know, Catherine just being here on her own in front of us, I don't know if that's.
Yeah, I know Mike Chambers was intending to, but he's at a GFOA event conference today, so that was part of it.
Okay, fair enough. And you feel comfortable presenting on your semi-behalf, or what have you. Okay, and also I would say too, I mean, your feelings towards one particular position could change in time too, so I don't want that to in any way, harm you in any way if you were interested in another position, so that's all. Okay, any other questions or comments? Mr. Miller?
Just a comment, I would just like to thank you for your flexibility and your willingness to wear multiple hats as needed to help Cuyahoga County as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Okay, and with that, so are we, obviously there's some type of timing element on this, but could we do 3 readings, or is this something that needs to be done?
Doesn't look.
Oh, okay. And so it expires, so there's a need to do that. All right, with that, then I'll make a motion to move R2021-0195 on second reading suspension. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Mr. Miller. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. All right, thank you. Madam Clerk, the next resolution.
Resolution 2021-0210, authorizing a hospital facility agreement in accordance with Ohio Revised Code, Section 140.03, with the Metro Health System for the transfer of various parcels of real property identified in Attachment A, hereto titled in various county-related entities and currently being used for public hospital purposes, to the Board of Trustees of the Metro Health System.
Okay, and if you state your name for the record. Okay, and if we could just have an explanation, is that not on? There we go. And just an explanation as to this legislation here.
Sure. This legislation authorizes an agreement between the county and the Board of Trustees of the Metro Health System to basically allow us to kind of cooperate to clean up title in all the properties that they hold right now. Over the years, under the Chapter 339 of the code, the county has always been in the chain of title and the name, what are part of the title holders to all of their properties, which has really caused a lot of confusion, I think, over the years. I mean, you may remember a couple of years ago, they did a housing project on a parking lot over there near their campus, and they had to come to us to allow them to transfer that property to that developer, so that developer could do that project. So it kind of puts more of this in control of the hospital system, gives them more flexibility when it comes to doing financing and so forth going forward. And from our side, we can take this off our property insurance. So we should save some money come next year when it comes time to renew our property insurance.
Okay. Explain that as far as what type of savings we'd be looking at.
I was afraid you're going to ask that. I'm going to suggest it's going to be around $500,000 a year, but I don't want anybody to quote me on that because the insurance market is just so volatile right now. And there is a certain kind of a volume discount that we get with the insurer, but that should be about how much we might save over the year.
Okay. And then as far as you mentioned allowing Metro Health or the Board of Trustees to have more flexibility with financing, could you just go into that a little bit? Or if there's someone here from Metro Health who would like to discuss that, that would work as well.
I'll take a stab at it, and then I will invite them to comment on that, because by cleaning up title, it just makes it easier for them to present to the market that they have the control that they need when they need to, take out debt and so forth. But if they want to add anything to that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of council. My name is Mike Tobin, Vice President for Communications, Community, and Government Affairs at the Metro Health System. In the audience is Sonia Reiki, Senior Vice President and Co-General Counsel. One of the driving forces for this legislation from our perspective is that as we do more projects like what Mr. Huth referenced, the housing on West 25th, as we look to build a 12-acre park on what will be our new campus, as we do more housing, job training facilities, those sorts of things. If we have the titles in the name of our Board of Trustees, that gives us more flexibility in terms of how we can finance these projects, whether it's tax credits, whether it's grant funding, a variety of financial instruments that we currently cannot access as it currently stands.
Okay. So let me ask I appreciate that, Mr. Tobin. So Mr. Law Director, how doesn't this take away some authority from the county itself, though, if we're not on title? For example, if Metro Health is doing a project and it doesn't have to come before county council, what if the county council person has a dispute with what the project might be? Doesn't it limit our control a bit?
It does to a large extent, yes. Yeah. The place it would, where the property would come, we would get back in the pictures if they wanted to sell it for something that's not related to the hospital.
Yeah.
We put a reverter in it to deal with that.
So just to clarify on that, though, so if the Board of Trustees sold the property, the county would have what, the first right of?
It would depend on the end use.
Depending on the end use, okay. Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to say it. I don't know that I like giving up authority from the county council to have a final say on something.
If I could just add
Yeah.
for perspective, medical care obviously is a competitive space. We compete against larger organizations, and Metro Health, for Metro Health to be on strong financial footing, to do the types of things that this county and this community have come to rely on, such as the community testing, the community vaccinations, the community-based projects. We need to be on strong financial footing, I guess I'm saying in a roundabout way. The goal of this is not to cut the county out of anything. It's simply that so we can be in a strong position financially to support our mission, to do the community-based care that this community relies on and has really been underscored over the last 18 months with COVID. Just
So let me ask you, Mr. Tobin, so who decides, the intended use of the property? Is it Metro or is it the county?
Well, I believe it's Metro Health through our leadership team, which reports to the Board of Trustees, which this council signs off on. We're engaged in all sorts of projects all the time that we don't come before council for approval on. It's looking at the community needs and trying to fulfill them to best serve our patients.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mr. Hood, did you have something to add or no? No, okay. All right, I'll open it to my colleagues. Any questions from my colleagues? Ms. Conwell?
Or through the chair to whoever wants to answer. Well, first to the chair of this committee. How long were you made aware of this?
I found out about this this past week.
And I guess to the law director, if this has been a problem over the years, beg my pardon, but I think it's the first time that I heard about it. Might not be, and don't quote me, but in all the years that I've sat on council, how long,
Yeah, Councilwoman, to Chairman of the Councilwoman, I don't know that it's been a problem for the county over the years, but I think it presents some hiccups or hurdles for the.
But I mean, the first time that we're hearing about it, that it was an issue with Metro.
As I said, I don't think it's an issue as far as, I'm not sure what's been communicated from Metro, but I don't know there's been a problem from our perspective. It's just.
Okay, can you speak to that, Mike?
Sure. I know our CEO, Dr. Boutros, has had conversations with Council President Jones. Prior to that, he had several conversations with then Council President Brady. So that was the conversation on the council side.
Okay, and Greg, this seems a little similar to the Cuyahoga County Board of Developmental Disabilities when they have to come before us. I think it's a state law or something like that. Why is this different?
Councilwoman, from the Chairman of the Councilwoman, there's actually a specific provision in the ORC that authorizes this type of agreement. These agreements can cover a wide variety of different issues, but we kept it narrowed to this one issue of how the property would be titled.
And so today you stand before us representing the administration
Yes.
that's going forward? I just came back from vacation, but I just want to say, Mr. Chair, I'm not comfortable until I learn a little bit more.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a stickler to anything. But
Yeah, and just so there's clarification, yeah, this is something to me new. If there's been discussions with the council president or the prior council president, that's between Mr. Boutros and those individuals. I spoke to Mr. Tobin yesterday, in full disclosure, and that was the first I've spoken with anybody from Metro on this issue. So I'm still trying to learn some of the nuances of the issues, so you're not alone in that. I did have a question regarding the insurance situation. So who will pay the insurance once property is transferred?
Metro will.
Maybe Metro? Okay. Mr. Sweeney had a question?
I have a couple questions, if that's okay. Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman.
absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Director, and Mr. Vice President of Government Affairs. I have a sequence. I think this is half-baked, basically, right now, and I wouldn't mind getting it all baked before we make a decision in regards to information, from my understanding. Are these parcels vacant right now?
No. Do you have the legislation in front of you as part of the agenda? There's an exhibit there that lists all the properties and describes how they're being used right now.
So that's why you would get to the point of what's, since there's stuff on there, that's why it's $500,000 through the chair of insurance liability. That's their estimated.
That's my guess right now, yes.
Yeah. And they're all controlled by Metro, the buildings?
They're all used by Metro. They're controlled by, if you look at, also on that exhibit is a list of how they're titled today.
Got it.
Which is really a hodgepodge of things that have developed over the years. So this would basically clean that up.
Got it. And through the chair to the presenters, the strong, base financially for Metro. This just makes it cleaner, and it says we own it, and it just puts you in a better position.
Right, and that's correct, but it also allows us to use different financial instruments and tools that we currently can't access. So, mortgaging the property, applying for tax credits, those sorts of things. It's similar to what we're doing with the Viasana project. It's not similar, it's identical to what we're doing with the Viasana project on West 25th, which will be affordable housing with a Tri-C job access center on the ground floor. So these projects that we are moving forward with are not elaborate money makers. They are to meet the needs
Investment
in the
in the
community.
neighborhoods. It's beautiful watching it. I drive by once a week, and it's getting more developed, higher, and we're looking forward to the grand opening. It's going to be a wonderful asset to it. Through the chair to the presenters, are you paying rent now on the land that we own to the? So it's just an understanding to build on.
And all of the properties were paid for with Metro Health dollars. These weren't properties acquired with county funds, just for clarification. These are all parcels that Metro Health paid for. It's just the way the state law is written requires that they be titled to the county instead of the Metro Health system.
Through the chair to the presenters, so that just makes sense because you're chartered, or the Ohio Revised Code has you as a public hospital, so.
Correct.
There's a little bit more. I don't have a full handle on it, but I can see it becoming clearer in my eyes. Then on the last point through my chair is, it's been going on for a while since you're talking about Council President Dan Brady, and were there discussions with Council President C. Ellen, and what were their objections then, and why are we doing it now? Is the thought process I have, and I'm actually going to sit with Dan on Friday just to
There's a
catch
piece
up.
of that, Mr. Chairman, of the councilman, that actually came through the law department, because it took us some time to get comfortable with the idea that both sides of the transaction could do what we wanted to do. I mean, for example, when you do loans with the development department, we want to be sure that the other side is given authority to whoever's signing the documents to enter into that agreement. So it took us a while to get comfortable with this until we started kind of digging into this section 140 and saw what we could do under that section.
Okay, I'm good. So basically, it's this administration, under your leadership as the director of law, doing your due diligence in a snapshot of time, that has come to this conclusion that this legislation is created, and you're asking it to move forward. And in the past, the law directors of the past and the councils of the past chose not to move forward with the same request.
I can't comment on what happened in the past, but I know what it took me to get to this
Can you,
point.
Mr. Tobin, hopefully that's an accurate statement?
To the chair, to the councilman, I'm not sure that's accurate. I think this is a complex issue. We raised it in the past, and I think as people dove into it and tried to understand it, as this council is going to do, then they became more comfortable with it. It's not a case where we said, hey, let's push this legislation, and they said, no, we disagree. It was more, we had many projects that are ongoing, and then you had a global pandemic. And I think it's just familiarizing people and walking them through the logic behind it and why we feel this would be very helpful to us.
Thank you for your flexibility with my questions, and this is getting more baked as we talk about it. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman?
Sure. Real quick before I take any of my colleagues, I got a question on the Ohio Revised Code section, Mr. Law Director. So if it's required under the Ohio Revised Code to be set up to say, so what gives us authority to be able to change it?
This section 140.03 of the code gives us the authority as a county and the Board of Trustees to enter into this type of agreement, as I said.
Okay.
And there's a bunch of exceptions to 339 in there. There's a bunch of places that cross-reference 339. But one of the specific things you're permitted to do with this type of agreement under this section is designate who holds title to the property.
Okay. A couple of folks asked, I think, Mr. Miller and then Ms. Conwell again.
So, I do have some concerns about the county potentially losing some control over this, but saving the $500,000 a year sounds very good to me. And I'm wondering whether we might attach an amendment saying that before Metro would either transfer or change the lease arrangements on any of these properties, they would simply notify the county executive and the clerk of council before doing so, so that if we had any concerns, we could express them. And my question is, would that be workable and acceptable?
I think I'll defer to our attorney who's worked on the nuts and bolts of this legislation.
Right, because I think right now, as the legislation reads, it says complete charge and control of the parcels, which that would not be in.
It's crystal clear.
Right, right. Okay, okay, if you could just state your name for the record.
Yeah,
Thank you
Sonia
for being here.
Reiki, Senior Vice President and Co-General Counsel of the Metro Health System. If your question is, if we're going to sell the property, then we would come back to the county. But we otherwise
no,
use.
That's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting is that if you're going to transfer any of these parcels or you're going to change the lease arrangements, you would simply notify the county. And if we had anything to say about it, we could say it before you did it. But you would still have the power to do whatever you want. It would just give us the opportunity to know about it, and if we had anything to say, we could put in our plug, but you could still do whatever you want. That's what I have in mind.
So transferring to me means changing the title to somebody else, so we would definitely come. But right now, we have the authority to change lease arrangements and to do things with the properties. And so that would be a different conversation. We already have that authority, so that would be giving authority that we already have.
But to share to Councilman Miller, of course, it's our intent to be fully transparent, and we have no qualms about alerting council whenever we make these sorts of moves.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Conwell.
Through the chair to the law director, were there any benefits? What were the benefits, if any, with the prior arrangement with the county?
Councilwoman, to the chair of the councilwoman, I think the control issue that you've been discussing here was the biggest issue.
Does it make our portfolio look any better or anything like that? I know we have to pay insurance, so.
Yeah, it's, I haven't done that analysis. I don't think so, but I haven't done that analysis. As I said, when it comes to the real estate insurance, there is a bit of kind of a volume discount, if you will. So that's why I'm thinking we're around $500,000, but I can't think of it affecting, because the beneficial owner and control is really in Metro today, I don't think it would affect our portfolio much.
Could you send me that 339 provision and whatever the 140 is?
Yeah.
Because there was a reason why it was set the way it was. Before we change it, I'd like to be a little clearer.
Are there any other county parties that have to be a party to this agreement? Other than the county council? I didn't understand something about the judges, I was informed.
Sorry?
I was informed something about the judges need to be notified as,
I'm not aware of that, but
Mr. Tobin, are you aware of having to discuss this with some of the judges?
Not as a legal matter, in discussions with attorneys for council staff, they suggested that, and I was going to go ahead and have those conversations, given that the two judges play a role in the appointment of the Board of Trustees at Metro Health, which this is, the under the legislation, that's who the properties would be titled to.
Okay. Any other questions, Mr. Sweeney? Sweeney, you're new.
And I'm just shy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this going to be only for Metro medical / hospital use only? If you want to tear a building down and put up a Burger King, could you do that? Could you control it 100%?
well, again, that's where the reverter clause comes in, that if they would want to do something like that, the property would bounce back to the current owner, so then they'd have to come talk to us about that.
That's in this legislation?
Yeah.
Talk to us or get county council's approval?
Well, you'd have to, at that point, you'd have to have approval, because the title would go back to where it is today.
Yeah.
Could you just explain that a little better? Because, so if Metro Health wants to do a project, put up a community center or something on one of these parcels, you're saying you would, if we approve this legislation, you would not need to come to county council for any approval on anything. That's correct?
On some things, like, again, it would depend on who the end owner would be and what the end use would be. This is the kind of thing that when the transaction is being put together on their side, a title company's going to look at it and say, look at the deed and say, hey, there's a reverter in this deed. Do we have to insure through this? And that then triggers a conversation with us, with the county, about whether or not the reverter applies, and if it does, how do we make it work?
Okay, so if possible, what makes the reverter kick in, Mr. Law Director? What?
A use that's not beneficial to the hospital, to Metro Health.
And who defines that?
Well, again, that's the kind of thing that the title company is going to flag that and say, we're not going to close this transaction unless you get this resolved. So that's what would force them to come to the county then.
Okay.
It's on that same point.
Okay, Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you. It's not crystal clear exactly. We're letting a title company through the chair decide to red flag something that is determining if it's a positive use for Metro to move forward. And I go back to my original. Is the title company going to go, oh, look, they want to sell it to a non-hospital medical use, or keep control of the property and partner with somebody that's a non-medical Metro use? I'd like to see some kind of very specific language in there that doesn't allow that to happen. And I haven't read it all in full depth. This is the very beginning process of this piece of legislation. And that's my question now on the same topic that the chairman and I have been asking.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney.
If I could just point out.
I'm sorry, go on, Mr.
I
Tobin.
apologize. To the chair, Councilman Sweet, you used the example of a Burger King.
I backed off on that one.
Oh, okay. I was just noting that we opened a dental clinic in Ohio City where developers wanted to put in a McDonald's. These are the types of projects we're talking about. These community use projects. I just raised that.
Absolutely, 100%. This leadership under Dr. Brutos and his leadership staff and every employee in Metro is showing the example of what a steward of county dollars and taking care of the neighborhood at all different levels. But when we transfer property, that's forever. And the next one that comes in, and the next one that comes in. I just want to make sure we're protecting our interest as well as under our time here. So it's nothing about Metro. And you saved that corner. And I was there for it. And the neighborhood is rejoicing and continues to rejoice on that dental center. And it's packed with cars every time I drive by, which is exactly what we want to see. So thank
Right,
you.
no, I appreciate your comments, Mr. Sweeney. Ms. Baker?
Yes, and I apologize for being late, but I'm kind of getting up to speed here. I know I missed this at the beginning. I'm sorry if I'm asking again. What is the benefit to the county for engaging in this process?
Chairman of the Councilman, the biggest one is, from where I sit, is that it's going to lower our property insurance costs.
Didn't
Because
we
right now,
just-
we're paying the premium on,
Didn't we just say we are in a group insurance overall, and how much will that reduce it? Do we have that answer?
yeah, it's not an answer, it's a guess, because the insurance market's so volatile right now, but I'm guessing about $500,000, looking at what we're paying for the hospital's portion right now.
So the only benefit then is money?
From the county
Just
perspective?
For the county perspective.
Most obvious one to me, yeah.
I agree with the comments that were made about getting more defined language on what it takes to reach the point of whether or not it is a use within the scope here, or whether it's outside the scope of use, if it were to be developed. And I'm not sure if money is always the driver for giving up property. I have questions about it, too.
I appreciate
Mr.
that.
Chairman, if I can suggest that,
Yes.
you know, this obviously doesn't need to get passed right away. So when we go back to the table and look at this a little bit and see what we come up with.
Right, I appreciate that. I mean, I think some of the comments today from several of the council people are things that maybe you can look with, you know, and go back with Metro folks and kind of tinker with some things to make everybody feel at least a little more comfortable moving forward if this does move forward. So it's obviously something that the Board of Trustees is looking for, and I'm not necessarily saying it's not a good idea, but let's do a little bit more work on it and bring up our comfort level here to make sure that we're doing the right thing for the county and Metro Health. Yes?
Through the chair to Law Director, Mr. Tobin, can you state again why you want to move forward at this time? I know Councilwoman Baker wasn't present, but I just want to be clear on that.
Sure. To the councilman through the chair. We are engaging in a variety of development projects along West 25th and in other places, looking actually throughout the county. Projects that are focused on social determinants of health, on improving public health, on taking care of our patients. And by transferring the deeds from the county to Metro Health, and then our 501c3 Development Corporation, in some cases, that allows us to tap into a variety of financial tools, such as tax credits, that would allow us to make it easier for us to do these sorts of projects. So I hear what you say about the financial not being the driving factor, and I understand that and appreciate that. From my perspective, Metro Health being on strong financial footing and able to do these projects reduces the need for us to come back to the county and say, can you help us on these, help us pay for these things. A strong Metro Health system financially is good for this county, as I think you all know. So that's the logic behind why we want to do it.
If I may?
Sure, Ms. Baker.
So I understand that, and it on the surface seems like a good initiative. I guess I have to look at this a little deeper, but there's quite a few parcels here, and you certainly can't do all these parcels at one time. Are there certain parcels that you're looking at that are rated higher than others that you can get started on first? Is there a reason why we need to take a sweep of all of these parcels all at once? Perhaps one by one, maybe I have one here in Westlake. but there are a lot of Old Brooklyn Senior Health and Wellness Center, parking garage. I mean, there's a lot here. I just wonder why a sweeping ask and not maybe a one or two at a time that you have perhaps visions of wanting to enhance.
To the councilman through the chair, that's a fair question. We have, we have things in the works, some of which are public, some of which are not at this point. At Old Brooklyn, we're in the process of building a skilled nursing facility with ProMedica. That part is public, so we're moving forward on that. As this council knows, we're building a behavioral health hospital in Cleveland Heights. We have various parcels along West 25th as part of the campus transformation, including the 12-acre park, which will be, open for use to everyone. So you are correct that, I'm sure we have a prioritized list, but that being said, there are a lot of things we're not doing one and then two and then three. It's more like we're doing 7 and then the next 5.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. If there's nothing further from my colleagues specifically on this, what I would do at this time is I'm just going to hold this in the committee, and Mr. Huth and maybe attorney, your last name again? Thank you. Can kind of work to alleviate some of the concerns that some of my colleagues have, and we can maybe come back, schedule something in a few weeks or so, and see where we're at. Okay? Yeah. Appreciate your information here and your cooperation. Thank you. Okay, Madam Clerk, if we could, the next piece of legislation.
Resolution 2021-0211, authorizing an amendment to contract number 1689 with the Savron Group, LLC, for lease of office space located at 12100 Snow Road in Parma for use by Fiscal Office Auto Title Bureau, Satellite Office Number 4, for the period November 1st, 2006 through October 31st, 2021, to assign interest to Enterprise BMV LLC, effective November 1st, 2021, to extend the time period to October 31st, 2026, and for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $333,182.16.
Okay, and thank you for being here. If you could please state your name for the record.
Good morning, John Myers from Department of Public Works. I'm here today to speak on 3 leases. This first one up is an amendment for existing lease for our Parma auto title that we have for the convenience of the citizens. We have several satellite offices to be able to acquire a new title. This is for a little over 3,000 square feet of space at an office located at Snow and Chevy Road in Parma. It's a 5-year amendment for a total of $333,000 with some minor improvements and some additional COVID cleaning provided for in this lease amendment.
Okay, and so this is going to run from what dates?
From this November through 5 years through October of 2026, Mr. Chairman.
I was thrown off because it's not past the date.
Appreciate your...
Thank you.
Okay.
I won't characterize the word.
It's a joke. Okay, so I appreciate that. And this is the Auto Title Bureau, pretty straightforward. What type of minor improvements are we looking at the facility?
Just some touch-up painting and some repair of some things, the replacement of carpet that's worn, minor items like that.
Okay, and is the COVID improvements going to be used from the federal government money?
Yes, we'll be asking to draw down those additional funds. They're segregated out to provide for the opportunity to have reimbursement for those costs.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from my colleagues?
Just a quick one.
Okay, Ms.
if you don't
Baker?
mind. Does this price include snow plowing and landscaping and all that usually tenants pay?
Mr. Chairman, to Councilwoman Baker, yes, it's an all-inclusive lease, save for utilities.
You built that in? Is that
Yes.
it? Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? And seeing that we're moving up on that time, what are you looking for as far as moving this forward?
Mr. Chair, I'm going to ask on all these today for second reading suspension. I think we have time on the auto title, but I'd prefer that we get it done as sooner rather than later with your.
I have no objections to that, so I'll make a motion for second reading suspension on R 2021-0211. Do I have a second? Okay, we have a second from Mr. Sweeney.
Chair,
All
may I
those-
just ask a quick
Oh,
question?
sure.
Can you just, I see the big number of 333,000, but what is it per square foot?
It's approximately, which is on the second page of the amendment, Mr. Chairman, to Councilwoman Baker, it's approximately $19.50 per square foot.
1950, and of that 1950, do you take a couple of dollars off for the triple net? Is that like a $17 a square foot plus another 250? Do you break it out that way or no?
Mr. Chairman, Councilwoman Baker, no, we don't. We sort of negotiate what we want in it and come down to that price.
All inclusive. Okay, interesting. Thank you for that.
All right, so we have a motion and a second on the board here. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Okay, and Mr. Myers, if you want to continue.
Yes, continuing this.
May I read
Oh,
it
I'm
into the
sorry,
record,
I'm
please?
sorry, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Resolution 2021-0212, authorizing an amendment to contract number 1255 with K&Z Mutual Realty LLC as successor in interest to Mutual Investment Properties LLC for lease of office space located at 9830 Lorraine Avenue in Cleveland for the period October 1st, 2006 through September 30th, 2021, to extend the time period to September 30th, 2026, to add a provision for an option to purchase premises and for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $2,617,000.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Myers?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this is a renewal primarily servicing our Health and Human Services departments. It's our West Shore Training Facility located at West 98th and Lorraine. The county has been in this site for quite a few years and has been renovated and outfitted for our specific purposes. In addition to HHS in this 20,000 square foot facility, the PRC is also, this is their home, and they also take advantage of the training space in larger rooms for test taking and other accessibility to reach out to make it easy for the public to interact with testing and other paper requirements for that. As you can see, this is for $2.6 million. We've also negotiated some additional COVID cleaning, as well as a purchase option that would be incorporated to give us the right to purchase this anytime in the next 5 years, should that be desirable to us.
Okay. So who's housed in here? Is HHS and?
Correct, primarily HHS
HHS.
training.
All right. And why wouldn't we possibly look into purchasing the building?
Well, it has been something considered, and there's always debates as far as the benefits of owning versus leasing. And in the past, HHS leadership has come down on the side of wishing to continue to lease. But we have, as I said, negotiated into this the right to purchase this facility should that change tomorrow or in a year or two, that we have the right to purchase that and have a formula set up to accomplish that.
Is the provision in there for option to purchase, is that at the end of the lease, or could it be during any time during the lease?
Anytime.
Okay, I'll open it up to my colleagues. Any questions? Mr. Miller?
Does the agreement about the purchase specify what the price would be?
Mr. Chairman and Councilman Miller, there is not an exact price. There's a formula as far as, it's negotiated. If we're not in agreement, then it provides for each party to get an appraiser, and if they're within X percent, that would be an agreed upon number. If not, then a third appraiser would come in to review that. That would be a fixed number that has some objective base in market based price.
And do we have a ballpark on what the price looks like? What's the range?
We don't, because we haven't exercised, we haven't been charged to purchase this, so we would have to go out and get a current market-based appraisal for it, but to determine any potential value of sale versus lease.
And this is for 5 years, so you're looking at something in the range of $500,000 a year for the leasing. Is that correct?
Roughly, yes, Mr. Chairman and Councilman Miller, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Baker?
Yes, thank you. Given that they are willing to sell the property, is it currently up for sale? Can anyone step in and buy this property while we're still trying to lease it?
Mr. Myers?
Mr. Chairman, to Councilwoman Baker, it is not currently on the market. It's not being marketed. In fact, the owners did not wish to even have the purchase option in there. So that was something that was some back and forth on to reach that agreement. They're happy with the situation as it is now.
Do we have the first option to purchase if they were to desire to put it on the market?
We have the ability to match that, yes,
The ability to
if they
match
have
it.
an offer.
All right, and parking, how is parking there?
The parking's pretty good, Mr. Chairman and Councilwoman Baker. There's 2 lots on either side, on the north and south side, and there's excellent public transportation there down Lorraine Avenue, and it's close to Interstate 90. So there's good parking and good accessibility through public transportation.
Well, I would, suggest that we at least explore, especially if it has good parking and near good public transportation. And because the owners seem at least open to selling, that there could be a bidding war if there was any in the wind that we had an interest in purchasing it. Just a suggestion. The 20,000 square feet that's there, do we use all of that space?
Mr. Chairman, Councilwoman Baker, yes, 26,000 square feet. In fact, in previous years, we had the landlord expand it to accommodate what was primarily a neighborhood family service center then. It's morphed a little bit more into training for HHS countywide and regionally. Other health and human service agencies share training costs and other things, as well as now the home of the PRC.
If I just may, one more. So there are opportunities that we could perhaps sublease when we're not using it for training, if it's not being used every day, 24 hours a day, or how often is it empty, I guess I should.
Mr. Chairman and Councilwoman Baker, I can't speak as well to that. I'm not involved in the programming, but I do know it's used heavily. I pass by there frequently, and the lot is usually full, and I know from speaking to the manager, our county manager of the building, that we had recently a plumbing issue come up, and, so I was amazed, frankly, at how scheduled the building is between the PRC's test using and HHS training. So I think to sublease it would be a challenge because we lease during business hours as well as outside of business hours. They do evening training for adoption parents who are interested in adoption and weekend type training to help reach the public. So it's a pretty utilized building.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Miller and then Mr. Sweeney.
A follow-up question. Under the lease agreement, are we guaranteed the right to lease this space for 5 years, or if someone comes along and makes the owner an offer they can't refuse, do they have an out clause where they can say in 90 days or whatever it is, we're terminating this lease and we're going to sell the property?
Mr. Chairman, to Councilman Miller, no, we have the, this is for the full 5 years to lease if we, regardless of the ownership. It would be ours to continue to lease.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Sweeney?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to Mr. Myers. just to my colleagues too, this is a fixture in our neighborhood for many, 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 many years. It's in the district I have the privilege of representing. And as I said, part of the fabric, if this goes, this is our county building. And there's so much activity, and now the county's training folks there. So my whole thing is 5 years is just a snapshot. Is it a 5 year and a 5 year and a 5 year with our option? As long as we can push this out as possible, the better it is, I believe, for at least the neighborhood that it surrounds, but also the entire county as it is used by everybody. But just as a building on the corner of 98th and Lorraine, that's an anchor. So can you comment on that? Thank you.
We always continue to look at options for short, medium, and long-term, and which are always changing, as we've learned in this past year how our vision of work has changed as far as space relations. So both Public Works and HHS are always looking at ways to reduce our footprints. So we're always looking at this as how do we maximize this particular location. And since we've invested in the building as far as build out, I think there's a strong commitment to this site. And I think this current lease, since it was coming due, the decision was made to continue leasing, and then why we pushed hard for this purchase option, so that while HHS continues to evaluate its space needs, we'd have a better sense, an argument to either buy or continue leasing for a longer period of time at this site. So I think we're committed to the site as far as I can see, and we'll have the ability under this to have control over that decision and your all council's decision in support of whatever you want to do at this location.
And just my last is the option of buying it. You'd have full support from the local councilman from the district, and with the dollars that have come in from the federal government that says do good things for Cuyahoga County, I'd like this to be at least in the mix of the discussions to purchase it so we can have control for as long as we want. Thank you. And
Duly noted.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Ms. Conwell?
Through the chair, we still have our out clause in.
We do not, as part of our negotiations, and because of our heavy investment in the building and the heavy use, that was one thing that's not in this that we try, but is not in this particular lease. So we have a 5-year commitment.
Push for the purchasing.
Yes, there was some things were on and off the table.
And when was the building built? If we're entertaining the idea of possibly purchasing, how old is the building?
Mr. Chairman, to Councilwoman Conwell, it was a AMP and a Pick and Pay stores. I think it was built post-war, like early 50s. And then it was a major addition and really a gut rehab about 15 years ago under our dollar and direction. So the building's in good condition and shape.
I remember those conversations me and you had about all the leases, and so we have a total of 4. I'm okay with continuing to lease it.
Very good.
Okay. Ms. Baker?
Yes, leasing is an option as long as we don't lose it. That's I guess that's the threat, is that anytime you write in an ability to purchase, that means the owner has at least some notion that he could sell. And then you get yourself into a bidding war if you're already leasing, especially have years of leasing that you don't want to give it up. It drives the cost up, but that's all speculative. For clarity, in the resolution, it says 31,362 square feet, and I think you mentioned 26.
I am sorry, yes, 26 was the original number and we added another 5 or 6,000 square feet, forgive me.
Okay. What was the increase then between the last lease and this lease, just in percentage?
It was a straight number for last 5 years, Mr. Chairman, to Councilwoman Baker. And so there was about approximately a 4% increase that we're looking at. And the first 2 years and another 2% for the last 3 years, as I said, total for those whole 5-year period.
So it's 4%, 4%, 2, 2, and 2?
No, 4% for the total for the first 2 years, and then 2.4 for the last total for the last 3 years.
And that includes the extra 5,000 square feet?
Yes.
So we're actually getting more square footage this time around than we did last.
And I may have misled. The last time the build-out was already in place, so that's not reflected in that fashion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from colleagues? Okay, seeing none.
And Mr. Chairman, if I
yes.
could ask on a second reading suspension for consideration on this.
Right. I will make that motion for second reading suspension in R 2021-0212. Do I have a second?
Second, Sweeney.
Okay, I have a second from Mr. Sweeney. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And I'd like my name added.
Okay, and Ms. Conwood would like her name added to this legislation?
As
All-
me as well.
And Mr. Sweeney as well. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Resolution 2021-0213, authorizing an amendment to an agreement with Progressive Casualty Insurance Company for lease of land and corporate hangar facility at the Cuyahoga County Airport, located at 26340 Curtis Wright Parkway in Richmond Heights, for the period October 1st, 2006 through September 30th, 2021, to extend the time period to September 30th, 2026, and for additional revenue in the amount of $568,500.
Okay, and if you could just state your name for the record.
Again, Mr. Chairman, John Myers from the Department of Public Works, here to seek authority and permission to proceed with an amendment with a lease that we currently have in place out at the county airport with Progressive Insurance Company, where they house their planes. And they have the option here to take this amendment, and we're proceeding forward with that in place to cover the next 5 years.
Okay. This is a renewal?
Yes, so revenue generating and renewal, second amendment to the lease with Progressive.
And how many planes do they keep out there?
2, I believe.
Questions from my colleagues? Seems pretty self-evident. And obviously, with the timing element, you're looking for second reading suspension on this as well.
I would appreciate that, Mr. Chairman.
So I'll make that motion. And we have a second from Councilwoman Conwell for second reading suspension on R 2021-0213. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Thank you, Mr. Myers.
Thank you all.
All right, and Madam Clerk, if you could, the last item.
Ordinance 2021-0013, an ordinance amending Chapter 503 of the County Code, Small Business Enterprise Program Policies and Procedures, to approve revised Cuyahoga County Small Business Enterprise Program Policies and Procedures effective of a date to be determined, and to adopt Minority Business Enterprise and Women Business Enterprise Program Policies and Procedures effective again on a date to be determined.
Okay, and if you could just state your name for the record.
Good morning, Lenore Lockett, Department of Equity and Inclusion. Today I'm going to give a brief overview of the proposed changes to the Small Business Enterprise Program and the Minority Business Enterprise Program and Women Business Enterprise Program. I've provided copies of the manuals, and there's a PowerPoint. I'm going to give a brief overview. I'm not going to go into detail on every slide. That's there for your information, and if there's certain topics that you want me to provide further detail on.
Okay, appreciate
So
that.
I'm going to proceed at a high level, even though I've been known to get into the weeds, so I'm going to try not to.
Okay.
Okay, so the proposed recommendations are the result of, a cumulative result of our 2020 disparity study, which builds upon the 2014 disparity study recommendations. The 2014 disparity study recommendations are listed. I provided a brief overview of where we are as far as implementing those recommendations. The 2020 disparity study had an additional 8 recommendations that built, again, upon the the prior recommendations for the 2014 disparity study. In response to those recommendations, in January, County Executive Armin Budish issued 4 executive orders that were in alignment with those disparity study recommendations. So the changes presented to you for review and consideration are cumulative of the 2020 disparity study recommendations and the executive orders. They're presented, we are anticipating at least 3 council readings for those approvals. Upon approval of those final, if they're approved, we will plan to do trainings. The trainings, because of the significance of the changes, we're looking to train both internally and externally. First, we're looking to train internally the procurement staff as the supplier diversity initiatives are weaved into the procurement process. And we're also looking to train vendors, both county certified SBEs, MBEs, WBEs, but also non-certified vendors also, because again, there's a partnership and interplay between those vendors with the procurement process in order for these initiatives to be successful. This is a brief overview of the changes that are in the documents. And as I stated, I'll just proceed through. Please, obviously, let me know if you have any questions. The first changes, where there's 2 categories, small business enterprise, and there's the MBE, WB enterprise. We're still sticking with the definitions. There's SBEs will still required to be located in Cuyahoga County. MBEs, WBEs, there will be a change in the geographic location, and that's based on the availability, the relevant market that we're interacting. So with each disparity study, they look at our contracting and purchasing over that time period and determine what is our relevant market. For the current 2020 disparity study, the relevant market for our program will be the Cleveland Metropolitan Statistical Area, which the difference is that it does not include Summit County, but it does include the counties listed, which were part of the previous certification category. The other change is that originally the certification process was for 1 year. We're looking to extend that for 2 years. We feel that's a benefit to the vendors that they do not have to submit paperwork each year to renew their certification. But we also feel that that 2-year window still ensures us that we have some accuracy on the information where we're revisiting the demographics, ownership, and location and services offered by those vendors within that time period. The one significant change is how we're going to set the contract by contract goals. Under the 2014 disparity study, there was MBE aspirational goals, which again, at that time, it was based on the availability in the market by the categories. So for instance, in construction, the availability for that category said there were 17% MBEs and there were 6% WBEs and so on as listed. So when a contract came, for instance, a construction contract, as long as we had a sufficient pool of vendors in that, if it was construction in that category, certified with the county, and there was no prohibition on the funding source, meaning a lot of times, for instance, construction used DBE, federal funds, so that would be a DBE goal. So if we were locally funding it, then we would just use those goals and add on the SBE percentage. However, because they were aspirational, a vendor were prime submitted, they could just say what they did to try to meet all of the goals in general, that they didn't have to specifically detail what they specifically did for MBE, what they specifically did for the WBE goals. It was more, you aspire to have a diverse subcontractor pool. What the new change is going to be using the, was based on the DBE format, which is that you have to do a calculation based on the scope of work. So basically, I'll go ahead to the proposed worksheet. You will, for each scope of overall procurement, you're going to subdivide that into different categories based on the NIGP code, which is the National Institute of Government Purchasing, which is a code of classification for the scope of work. You would divide them on those scopes, and then based on the disparity study, they provided details based on those codes, what the number of MBEs that they were able to document work and are operating in that NIGP code. And similarly for WEBE, and you would do an actual calculation and come up with the final percentage. Go ahead.
Lenore, if I could just real quickly, So who is actually going to be doing this?
So the first three columns will be provided by the department. They're the experts at what the scope of work is contained and what their proposed estimate is and how it's portioned between those different scopes of work. Then that will be uploaded as part of their requisition. And then I'll be the one actually doing the calculation. As part of the disparity study, Griffin and Strong gave a database. And I'll have to go in and based on each NIGP code, document the number based on that study and come up with the calculation.
So if, this looks complicated to a guy like me, so I'm just looking at this. So is there somebody else along with you that will know how to do this? I mean,
Well,
if,
my
you know,
staff,
your
yeah.
staff is going to be trained in how to do this as well, okay? Because I don't want to, if you're down, everything's down.
Yeah.
Okay, because it looks like a formula, obviously, and I won't tell
Right.
you how I did math in school, so,
Right.
okay. I was just checking, thank you.
So that's the more stringent, specific goals based on the actual scope of work for the procurement as opposed to the aspirational. Now, and as you're familiar with, as the Board of Control agenda and the County Council agenda, formal bids are procurements that occur over 50,000. On average, there's about 185 to 100 RFBs, bids, for RFPs and RFQs in that category per year. So really, that's only 100 opportunities per year for me to have the contract by contract goal setting and provide diversity goals. We're looking at increasing the participation under the 50%, under the 50,000 mark, because those on average, those are what, if you look at the Board of Control, there's a DO list, and on average, at a minimum, there's 10 awards per week. That's at a minimum. So if you say 50, we have 50 Board of Control meetings, that's 500 opportunities. So our goal is to try to make sure we put a concerted effort in increasing MBE, WB participation in the smaller contracts, the 1,000 to 49,000. Those have a less, quicker turnaround. They're on the weekly agenda. Usually the county code requires a minimum of 8 hours posting. Usually they're posted for about 1 day to 3 days. So there's a quicker turnaround. There's usually a less onerous submission requirements. And also usually there's a quicker turnaround on those contracts, so that hopefully that makes those more attractive to not just vendors in general, but small businesses, minority business, and women businesses. What we're looking to do is with the Enforce system is push that initiative in that category by requiring departments, and we're not trying to make the process significantly learn, we're just asking that when you make those purchases, that you come to either check our list online to see what MBEs, WBEs are available, and or contact the Department of Equity and Inclusion so we could provide you a list of who we feel are available based on our current knowledge of the scope of work added by the certified businesses, so that the departments will have that list, and when they're ready to advertise for those in the Enforce system, that they will get that information. And so we're trying to push those 500 opportunities as a way to increase minority and women business enterprise and get familiar with the county's process.
To that point, through the chair, Lenore, the MBEs and WBs, they need to be licensed with the
The Enforce
county.
system. So yes,
Okay.
so that's one of the things that we're pushing now is to sample one of our emails. Right now, what we're doing is that when we go in each day, we look at that list of what's available in the system, and we send an email to our list. Now, we're hoping we're pushing for them to get registered, because in that way, they can go in as their own and themselves register and pick the NIGP codes that are relevant to them, so that they can get that email information themselves and get that awareness of what's specific. Right now, our capacity is that we can do a general email, so we're hoping it doesn't get caught as in spam or overload, because we're just sending a list of everything that's available that day. And the reason we want to do it daily is because, again, most of these under 50,000, they only have to advertise for 8 hours. Now, some departments do a day or more than 8 hours, but again, we want to make sure that we're getting that information out there so that businesses aren't missing opportunities.
Mr.
Oh,
Miller.
go ahead, I'm sorry.
On the larger contracts over 50,000, to what extent are the goals moving from aspirational to mandatory?
So we cannot have a quota. So any formal bid, RFP, RFQ, I will evaluate it based on that spreadsheet. Now, again, if there's federal funds, certain funds, I can't use our program. They might have a DBE goal. I also have to look, for instance, sole sources. We're not going to set a subcontracting goal on sole sources, and all exemptions. So it's only when you do a formal bid, RFPs and RFQs. So that's why it's limited to about 85 per year. But I will analyze all of those for a goal. The current procurement process is that when you do a formal bid, RFP and RFQ, you have to do a requisition, and I'm in the workflow for that requisition. So all of those are analyzed for the ability to do a set a goal.
So, to follow up, you said that it can't be a quota, but I get the sense that in some sense the requirement has been enhanced, and we used the term aspirational before. I'm just trying to get an understanding of how under the new regime is it different.
So yes, the next component is the good faith effort. I'll skip to that part right quick. So under the good faith effort, so we do not have a quota. So if I set a goal at 10%, if we calculated it and it's 10% WBE, 10% MBE, now that those goals are contract by contract and they're more stringent than aspirational, we've actually said the Disparity Study has done an analysis, stated that there's vendors that can provide those services. Now there's a more stringent requirement to say, okay, we have more stringent current data. This scope of work is applicable. This scope of work and goals are tailored for this item. What if you didn't meet the goal because you, for whatever reason, state that you cannot find an MBE, WB to participate, what efforts did you make? So for instance, there's requirement that you have to reach out to vendors on the list, or first check the county website, find our list of MBE certified, WB certified for your particular scope or area, for your scope of work. Then you have to outreach to them, not the day before the bid is due or RFP or proposal is due, at least a week before. We need documented proof. We need a week before at a minimum. You can reach out earlier, which I'll get to while we've expanded the posting period to make it a longer period. But at least a week before, you have to provide proof to us when you submit your bid or proposal. What emails were sent? Did you tell the vendor what the bonding requirements you were going to require of subcontractors? Did you detail what scope of work you were willing to sub, so they're not shooting in the dark? There's 20 items on the list. Let them know which areas you're interested in getting a response. So no, it's more of to make it an efficient process. So it's not like, oh, they gave me proposals on fencing, but I wasn't interested in subbing fences. You have to provide clear documentation to the vendors on what areas of work you're trying to subcontract. And it's not just a one time. There's follow through, that you call and follow through, that type of information. Also, and I'll skip, I had sample forms. At first we're requiring, definitely submit the information. Not just keep track of it, submit it with your bid or proposal, so that way we can make a quick assessment. And I wanted to show when a vendor cannot meet the goal, they have to document on this and certify, notarize it. What did you do? Did you attend the pre-bid meeting? What portion did you do? Were the prices that you got back too high? You also have to detail on, I didn't provide the second one. But there's a third page where you have to detail who you actually contacted. When did you contact them? What was their response? Our staff is part of that process. We try to check, but again, we're trying to keep the process moving. So we currently try to call and check when they state and list, I couldn't meet the goal. These were the vendors that I contacted that didn't respond to me or did not provide a quote back. We call them. Again, we're trying to do the evaluation quickly, but again, business, especially small business, minority business, women business, if they're not providing goods and services, they're pursuing goods and services, so they may not always have as quick a response time as we would need. So that's why we're asking for the information to be submitted with the bid, your proof that you did contact these businesses, and also what feedback you received from those services.
So, Mr. Chairman, just a comment that the process that you're describing has a 60 to 70 year history of evolution. It's finely balanced between the concern that we can't set up a quota and make it automatic regardless of availability or qualifications, but on the other hand, we want to make sure that a real sincere, substantial effort is made to deal with the imbalances of distribution that we've been dealing with for a couple hundred years.
Yes.
So it's a considerable undertaking, and
Yes.
so I appreciate your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Ms. Baker?
Yes. Good work on your part. It looks like you put a lot of time and effort into this, and
Thank you.
just a couple of questions. The, on page, although I don't think these are numbered, contract by contract goal setting.
Okay.
What was it is now 17% MBE and 6% WBE. What was it before? What did that change from? Was the percentage lower, or?
The 17 and 6, that's the current.
That's current, okay.
Right,
So
so
what
it-
is it?
So the current numbers, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, no, so those are the current numbers.
Oh, I'm going the wrong way.
And what it's changing now to the formula?
Correct.
So can you give us a percentage of what you think that if the formula in a perfect world were to meet the criteria, what would that percentage increase to? Which I would imagine it would increase.
What I would say is that it would be based on when they did their market and they looked at the availability, let me see if I got the disparity study. So for, let's say, for example, for construction, the availability for white females, 17%, African American, 14.8%. So a cumulative for MBE, WB, with there were other demographics would be like 41%. Now that's for construction.
So 41% would be a combination of MBE and WBE? Is that what you're
Yes,
saying?
yes.
So that's considerably higher. That's, wow.
And that's the availability. Again, that's their assessment. Now, and the consultant tries to, when they look at that availability, they try to look at who's willing and able to do work for the market. So that doesn't mean, the difference is that that's the goal, but sometimes everyone may not want to submit on a contract or proposal that we're submitting.
And these other parameters, professional services, 10 and 5, and all those increase considerably too?
Well,
or?
professional services, their MBE, WB availability based on the estimate is 19%. Let me see if I could go back.
So again, twice as much.
And other services, 17%. So that was about the same.
And suppliers, 9%.
They have goods and supplies. They the availability in this study was 10.7.
Almost the same on suppliers. So the big jump is really the construction and the professional services, I think. Okay, and Lenore, what happens when, and a lot of times, you know, in approving contracts, we don't have many bidders. We say, you know, why don't you have more than 3 bidders? Why don't you have more than 2 bidders? Why is there only 1 bidder on this contract? Do you think that those that bid may be discouraged in bidding because of the additional process that perhaps at one time they thought that they could meet the 17 and 6 or the 10 and 5, but we have increased that, making it more difficult, and they maybe opt not to interact with the county? Is there any concerns about that when we perhaps have a lack of bidders on a certain project?
Well, there's always a lot of factors, and of course, people will, change is hard, so that will always be a factor with a company. If there's a new change, increased requirements, that could be a potential. But that the counter could be that if people feel that the county is more inclusive, there might be people who would never bid on the county that now feels like there is an opportunity. So that's one of the things that we're trying to counteract with that is doing the forecast. So people have a longer time, a more advanced, a 24-month forecast, so they know what's coming up, so they can do better preparation. And also that provides the opportunity for better partnering. Hopefully the SBs and MBEs, where now, instead of bids right now, they're going to get the information of what we're planning to purchase for 24 months.
Yeah.
And also we're extending the posting period. So for bids, we used to do 15 days.
Right.
And now we're doing 30 days. For RFPs, it was 22 days. Now we're doing 30 days. So again, yes, we're going to have more strategic goals, but we're also going to have a longer period for you to partner and find those businesses. And again, it's not a quota. It's provide an effort, a concerted good faith effort that we detail in the forms and documentation, what we mean by that, to say that you tried to be inclusive, because it's not a quota, but we want you to be, we're trying to make sure that integrity of the program, that you're working to provide inclusion.
If I may,
Yes.
for those that come close but perhaps don't meet, perhaps what another company may meet, does lowest and best ever play a role into this? Or is it, I mean, what gives the priorities of what we will engage with? Is it overall, all the points, or do we try to narrow it to this first and then take lowest and best?
So for a bid, the award method is still lowest and best. That's
Okay.
still the way it was before.
Okay.
And each vendor is evaluated on their own merits.
Okay.
Did they meet the requirements? Did they provide the documentation? And then I make a determination, did they good faith effort or not? There's also within our award method, we still have the price preference. That has not changed. I'm trying to get there. Which
Right,
basically says that the lowest bidder, if another is not, if I rule that they did not do good faith effort compliance and they're ruled non-compliance, the lowest bidder, we are willing to go within a certain range, depending upon that bid, to find someone who might be within that. So the price preference here. So basically, depending upon what the bid comes in, we're only willing to go 7% or 5% within that range to see if there's another bidder that is compliant. Also, one of the things, again, my goal is we're trying to nurture the inclusion and set up the process for everyone to succeed. So while we're going to have more stringent good faith effort because we're going to have more strategic goals, that's one of the reasons behind the administrative reconsideration panel is to give those apparent low bidders the opportunity that if, for instance, they feel that my evaluation or my department, DEI's department's evaluation was too stringent, they have an appeal process. And the reason we're setting up proposing an administrative reconsideration panel is, again, because we do not want to prolong the process. We want to keep the process going. So we felt if we had an administrative reconsideration panel, which would be a county executive appointed 3 to 5 member panel that's set up to meet at least twice a month if there's a appeal on a good faith hearing, a good faith effort evaluation by the Department of Equity and Inclusion. And that hearing doesn't have to be in person. The vendor themselves can choose to have a no meeting, what we're calling a no meeting hearing, where the body meets to evaluate, but they could just submit their paperwork. And again, DEI will submit what our reasoning for evaluating, or they can come in person. So again, the goal is for all of us to learn what work and effort we want vendors and to put in to have inclusion, and also our part to make sure that we're being fair or reasonable in our evaluation.
Okay, it'll be, okay. Thank you for that.
Okay.
So one other thing, oh, good.
Yeah, Mr. Miller.
On the administrative reconsideration panel, why are you setting up a separate panel instead of having the Board of Control, which handles contracts on a regular basis, do it?
Well, the one view was that we wanted, the part of the panel would be maybe departments that do not do a lot of purchasing, because there may be that conflict there. There's their contract, their vendor, their interest. So again, the panel is just to have a little more of a separation.
May I ask, Chair?
Yep.
I know you don't want to prolong the process because, you know, we have a short, perhaps, construction season, especially here in Ohio. You never know what obstacles get in the way. How much longer do you think it will take a company once they decide, yes, I'd like to bid on this and try to work within the parameters that are given, and even considering the reconsideration panel? I mean, how much time do you think you're adding to the process? Even though I know you're not trying to add it, but I think you'd have to have some additional time added to this process from beginning to end than we have now, or am I not?
So the posting period has changed to the 30 days. So for a bid that was 15, that has already occurred by
That's 2
executive
weeks.
order.
Okay.
Yes, and 8 days for RFPs. Because
And
it goes
that's-
from 22 days to 30 days. The standard was 22 days to 30 days. The administrative reconsideration is only for if the low bidder is found to be, or highest ranked is found to be non-compliant. That can still occur concurrent with the evaluation of the technical project. The equity or diversity review is after the buyer administrative review, but before the technical review. So at that point, they will be notified, but there is, the vendor does have 3 days to respond, and we're hoping that that panel at a minimum, so let's say worst case is 2 weeks. But that's only for that bidder, and it could be done concurrent with other processes.
So it's a 2-week additional process plus an extra 8 days,
For the posting.
and then 3 days they have to respond if they want to go through this reconsideration panel.
Well, no, the 2 weeks, so the 3 days and 2 weeks is
It's
based
within the
on them
same?
appealing, if they want to appeal. It's not a requirement that the reconsideration panel evaluate. That's a request by the vendor.
So it could be a 30-day delay overall if they went through the whole process and even gone through the reconsideration panel. 2-week extra.
The advertisement period, I guess you could call it a delay, but it's an opportunity for businesses to have a longer time to do a bid. For the department, yes, it is a delay in that they advertise, and now instead of waiting 15 days on a bid to get a bid,
Right.
or 22 days, but the vendors are working during that time. And it provides a longer window for more people to respond, to hopefully get more bids and responses to proposals.
And I know I understand that you want to bring in a larger pool of bids. That's really, and you want that larger pool to be more diversified. I get that. But is there any concern at all that because we sometimes only have a couple of bids, that your aspiration to include more may or may not, especially because it's a new program, may not happen, and that we're caught with not being able to get our streets and roads and bridges and everything else finished? I mean, is any concerns there that when we only have one bid or 2 bids to begin with?
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
yes, so there is no guarantee And so when you do a bid, you do want to make sure that the market, I know like, for instance, a while back, ODOT had a certain percentage where they only wanted a certain amount to let during this quarter, a certain percentage to let during this quarter, to try to make sure
Right.
you weren't flooding the market with 20 road projects, and capacity-wise, they couldn't. So there's always timing, the impacts. As far as, I'm not aware of an item where we won't have any bids, just because we're trying to be inclusive. If not, that's a kind of a sad statement for our market, but
Well, they may try, but they may be discouraged that they can't meet it and may not, and that's all. It's just,
so we are going to do training that is not a quota. We want an effort to meet it. We have specs and requirements. We have insurance requirements. We have a lot of requirements for participation. And we are not trying to create a hurdle that can be overcome. We're trying to detail what requirements and values are important to us. We want you to be technically responsive, and we want you to be diverse of the pool of how you subcontract.
right,
And we want you to meet the insurance requirements.
okay.
But there's no quota.
No quota. I guess the construction piece of 17 and 6 changing to a total of 41, that does seem
But
to
I don't
be-
know if it will change to 21. That was the availability percentage. Each percentage will be based on the scope of work. I don't know if there will be a 40. That's for the construction industry in general,
Right,
vertical and, yeah.
got it. Okay, thank you. I appreciate you giving me
Oh,
that
yeah,
line of questioning.
absolutely. So, Lenore, let me ask you this. Would it be possible, and there's a lot of information here that we're trying to process, and I have no doubt that the legislation is going in the right direction and well-intended and doing what we should be doing. I just want to make sure that we're doing it with in as much a streamlined process while maintaining the integrity of the law. So I know, just looking at some of this and hearing some of this, I know my colleagues will have some additional questions, and I'll have some additional questions, things that we'll think about. So what I would ask is that my colleagues put in writing any questions that they might have and put them forth to the administration so we can get them answered. Also, if there's any way we could maybe reduce the presentation to maybe a more simple bullet point presentation as to some of the key elements. I think that'd be helpful for, at least I know myself, and I'm sure some of my council colleagues here. So I would ask that we do that. I'll let you continue on with the presentation that you put together, because we want to hear that. We still want to hear that. But I know that there are a lot of questions, and I know we want to move this forward, but we want to do it right. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this in committee, and then we can ask some questions. We can have you back here, and maybe we'll have some of our answers to our questions taken care of next time we meet. And like I said, I certainly understand the importance of what we're doing here, and it is important. It's hugely important. And as Councilman Miller pointed out, we're trying to change a system that has been an unfair system to so many people for so many years. And, you're not going to do it if you're taking shortcuts. And we want to make sure that we're doing it the proper way. And so that's why I would hold it, not for any other nefarious reason or anything, just to hold it, make sure that we're doing this right. And I hope you're going to appreciate where I'm coming from on this. So, okay?
Mr. Chairman?
All right. Yeah, Mr. Miller.
In follow-up to Ms. Baker's questions, on a regular basis, does this process add time to the bidding process, and if so, how many days?
Which process? We are part of the evaluation, so yes, we are in the bid tab, so we take on average about a day or two to evaluate. We're part of the bid tab as far as the inclusion, so that remains. So right now, we evaluate the bid tab. Right now, there is no administrative reconsideration panel. evaluate the bid tab, and then the department can choose to proceed or not. If it's a price preference, they can, within the price, if the low bidder is non-compliant and there's no bidder within that 7%, then the department can choose to proceed with the non-compliant vendor, which means that we basically don't get the participation. And then a cumulative of that would be 5 years from now when we do the disparity study, we're saying there wasn't an impact. So this is just trying to provide a stopgap to say before 5 years and we look back and see 5 or 6 items that went through where there was no one within that 5% or 7%, that now we can provide an opportunity to have more training, to give more, say, hey, this is not a global aspirational, this is actually for this goal. This is kind of why for some reason the DBE goals might be 8 or 9%. They're based on the availability within that market, in that scope of work.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Miller.
I was apparently off on my communications because you answered some questions, but not the ones that I was hoping to get answered.
All right.
So let me try it this way. Under the new process, do bidders have longer to respond to an RFP, or is it the same?
Effective July 1st, the county executive's order issued that you post for 30 days. So starting July 1st, the 30-day requirement is in effect for county agencies.
And
I just memorialized it in the ordinance.
And previously it was how many days?
15 for bids and 22 days for RFPs and RFQs.
Okay, so it adds either 15 or 8 days to the process.
Correct. They started in accordance with the executive order, July.
And once bids are received, do you expect it will take us longer to process bids under the new process, or are you expecting it to be the same?
I'm expecting the majority to be the same, except if there's an appeal, then there's the 3 days that the vendor, when notified, will get to do the appeal. But on average, I'm not anticipating. Matter of fact, I'm hoping it'll be quicker because part of the thing is we're emphasizing to provide the paperwork up front, whereas now we state that it's in there, but it doesn't, like I just had a conversation with a vendor about an item, and he said, well, where does it state that I have to submit it to you? I called these people, I did this information. I said, but it wasn't detailed in the form and you didn't provide it. Oh, I didn't see that on this page. So now on the form, we're saying, you check that you did this, submit it. So we're hoping that process will be quicker.
And Mr. Chairman, Director, as you understand it, what was the executive's rationale for increasing the response time by either 8 or 15 days, respectively?
Was providing opportunity for vendors to have more time to partner with and pursue MBEs, WBEs, and other businesses to subcontract, and also a longer time to provide a sufficient response.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. You can continue.
Okay. The other point I wanted to bring up that was a small change is that right now, a prime, that's the SBE, MBE, WBE, receive a 20% credit. Again, this is on formal bids, RFPs, and RFQs. What occurs is sometimes that credit, because it's only in one category, will be used and evaluated for the overall total. In this example, let's say the goal is 10% SBE, 10% MBE, 10% WBE for an overall total aspirational goal of 30% SBE, MBE, WBE participation with the desired spread of 10, 10, 10. In this case, if a prime submits, they get 20%, then they'll only what we've seen the trend is they'll only pursue the other 10%, which means we miss out on the opportunity for getting one of the other category participation. So what we're looking to do is still give the credit to the prime, that's a SBE, MBE, or WB, so they still only have to subcontract for 2 categories, whereas non-SBE, MBE still has to subcontract because they're not one of the categories for 3 categories. We're still getting at least 2 participation in 2 of the other diversity categories. We went over to good faith effort, sample forms, and then administrative. The other change is just to emphasize that with RFPs and RFQs, we do not have a final price at that time. Bids, they come in with the price, lowest and best, quicker evaluation. RFPs and RFQs, vendors submit RFQs, they only do qualifications. RFPs, they do some pricing, but you may not see the scope, how it aligns. So a lot of times we do an initial evaluation and we don't get any, something to finalize that the final scope and costs had the desired SB participation. So the second bullet is just before that department does contracting, just to let us know what the final numbers are. So we know what the final participation is. I already told you the SB price preference has not changed. That still basically states that we will only impact a bid if the low bidder is not responsive and there's another bidder within this range that is also compliant. Monitoring post-awarding are still in process. We just now with more people have the capacity to be more proactive with our monitoring and more intense to make sure that the contractors are approving so we can do more frequent monitoring.
Yeah, so could you just go into that just a little bit? How are we going to continue to go into frequent monitoring? How does that work?
So right now we use the B2G software system. So when there's a diversity goal set for a contract and it is awarded with those goals, we first send a letter to the vendor and the sub saying, hey, the contract was approved. The vendor knows to go in, the prime, go in and detail when the contract started, the parameters we set, the contract is set up on the back office side with the details on the subs that are supposed to be used to meet the diversity goals and the contract amount. The vendors go in and submit their payments. They're supposed to submit them every month to show and the document that they're paying the subs and the subs have more work. With prior to July, we did hire 3 additional staff and we have more. Prior to that, we only had 3 contract compliance officers and they did the whole certification process. So with more people, there's an opportunity to do more checking on the progress of those reporting in the system.
Okay, thank you.
Finally, the grievance hearing board, which is a panel that can hear appeals if they don't on any certification, whereas the reconsideration panel is just on a good faith effort. The grievance hearing board is anything that deals with the Department of Equity, includes as far as supplier of diversity. The one change is that there was always 3 from the county executive side, but it was detailed by the position. It was the director of public works. It was the director, the deputy, the chief of staff for justice, chief of staff for development. In this case, we're looking to still have 3 appointed by the county executive, but not for it to be forced or assigned to a certain director role. It could be in that, a position or a person under the county executive leadership. And that allows for flexibility and longevity. And I'll give an example, like, for instance, when Mike Chambers was in Public Works, he was the he was the designee for the director of Public Works. But now that he's the fiscal officer, then by that county code, he can no longer be on the grievance board. But he does have expertise and knowledge that would be applicable. So this just makes it where it could be personnel specific, not necessarily a job role title.
Mr. Miller?
Am I correct that the grievance hearing board is not new, it currently exists?
It currently exists. The only change is the 3 appointees is not assigned to a specific position.
And Can you give me some idea of currently, how often does it meet? How many cases does it hear?
So it occurs based on a need. We have not had a grievance hearing in at least 6 or 8, maybe a year since COVID. Because usually when someone is denied certification or that category, if there was a dispute. Most of the time it was about certification. Oh, I believe I should be certified in this category, or my ownership has changed. And most frequently it was because of the trust issue, where we wanted to make sure that because the ownership is key with the certification category, and trust, there was a trend of trust, ownerships being in trust, and then we need to be able to document who was actually in control of that trust. So we haven't had a meeting in over a year.
So, since we have this board that's sitting there not having to do a whole lot at this time, why don't we have this board just do the administrative rehearings instead of having a separate 5-member panel set up for that purpose?
So one of the difficulties that we used to have with setting the grievance hearings, because it was set up, was to try to get it within a certain time period, was to find time on the calendar for all the 5 different positions to meet. So that's why when we were looking at the administrative hearing, they should have a set schedule, and if nothing comes up, and that's an opportunity. It could be where you have a weekly grievance hearing. If there's no grievance, you don't meet. That's an opportunity.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Miller. Ms. Baker.
So just clarify the reconsideration panel from the grievance panel. If they went through the reconsideration panel and it was found that they didn't have enough to warrant that they should be reconsidered, can they still go to the grievance, or is it over?
I believe we were, I gotta check. I believe that we settled on that it wasn't appealable, but let me confirm, 1 second.
It says here, good faith efforts not previously reviewed by the
Right, so our
administrator.
goal was that if you reconsidered it there, that panel was the decision, or you can wait and have just the grievance hearings do it.
Or you can pass on the
Yes.
reconsideration
Right,
panel
so
and
that's
go
why I
right to
stated,
grievance.
if it doesn't go. So the vendor can choose to go to the grievance hearing panel, or they can get a quicker review and go with the administrator.
Okay.
And again, I just wanted to go, mention the 30-day posting, that was initiated with the executive order. We're just adding it into the ordinance, that's our goal, to have 30 days for formal bids. That's those 85 items that are formal, 30 days, that's 15 days for the bids, 8 days for RFPs and RFQs. And again, a reasonable effort. If there's some reason, the funding source that preclude them from doing the 30 days, and again, we'll just go to the requirements of Ohio Revised Code. The other, it still was implemented by executive order, but we're putting in there as part of our outreach is the forecast, where we're providing the 24-month purchasing plan, so that vendors can see what we're planning to purchase. And that's the opportunity, again, if you know that you're interested in providing, let's say, office supplies, you can see when we're planning on doing a bid, RFP or RFQ for office supplies. So again, it gives you more advanced notice to start thinking and contemplating who you might bid. You might do public records and request the previous bid. Not that there's a guarantee that it'll be the same, but again, it helps you to have a more advanced noting to get familiar with what the requirements were before, to see if you might be interested, and also have a better way to start targeting or following to see when that's actually posted and available. So we just provide general information about the plan, procurement, scope of work, procurement method. Also, as part of that, one of the recommendations was to expand the small business set aside. So again, we know that there's a lot of effort and work. So part of working with the departments to come up with their 24-month plan is that we're going to look at what they're planning to buy and see, hey, does this make a good fit for our small business set aside program? So we can increase that. That was one of the recommendations, was to increase the incidence of small business set-asides. So as part of preparing the contract forecast, which will be updated every 6 months, we're also going to be talking to departments when they're doing their forecast to say, hey, what are you planning to use that's possible to be a small business set-aside? And again, this is the criteria that was submitted back in 16 when the ordinance for the small business set-aside was presented. As part of that, I had to submit what the criteria stays the same. We know that sometimes we can't do a set-aside if there's funding source or grant requirements that preclude us from saying only small businesses can compete against each other. We also want to look at the scope of work. We want the scope of work to be typical or simpler of the complexity that's expected for the industry, again, because we're providing an opportunity for small businesses to compete against each other. Finally, we want to make sure, again, as you brought up, Councilwoman Baker, that we always want to make sure the environment is competitive. So we want to make sure that there's a pool of SBs that are certified. Again, not a guarantee that they will submit, but again, make sure that there is at least a competitive environment. And finally, that there aren't performance bonds or insurance requirements for that specific scope of work that would make it more onerous for small businesses. And that basically was the
Yes, Mr.
highlights.
Miller.
On that last point, is there anything additional that we're doing in this round of upgrades to our program to make it easier for small and minority firms to meet performance bond requirements?
Not specifically in my area. I know that we are in general, we've working with, there's like a multi-department group that includes Public Works, the Law Department, Risk, WATF, and purchasing and HHS, where we've preliminary started a how to do business with the county, and we're looking at doing smaller, like trainings or outreaches or segments based on different portions of our procurement process that can address that. And one of the areas that was brought up was the insurance and bonding. And I believe, and I don't want to speak for Risk, but I know that there's been talks about other opportunities related to HHS vendors and insurance requirements.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Ms. Baker.
So just in wrapping up, we don't want to say we're going from zero to, a new we were, I think, in this county, pretty proactive, and I know you were very engaged in the construction of meeting 23%, at least. There could be more, but at least 23%. And professional services were at 19%. I mean, those were parameters that I thought, at the time at least, every time a contract came before us, we said, did they meet the MBE and did they meet the WBE? So, what we're doing now is we are enhancing what we have already done and tried to do and initiating programs to get us there. But we aren't starting at zero, or do you think we really are? Is this a program that takes us back or brings us to a place where we are initiating new requirements and new percentages because what we did was not enough? I guess.
No, I wouldn't say it's new. What I would say is first that even with the 17 and 6, stating that someone complies was basically what I'm saying now, is that it might have been a mix of they had some participation and good faith effort.
Right.
So they could have had, if the goal was 17, they might have had 12,
Right.
but showed that they tried to meet the other 5, or that, so it was aspirational, and saying someone complies meant that they either had fully complied, meaning they had the 17 and 6 and SBE, or they had partial, which they might have had full WBE or some MBE, some SBE, but they did show good faith effort.
Right.
or they might have tried and didn't get anyone. There are some limited situations where it might have been a bridge project and components were very small, or it might have been late in the construction season, or it might have been this, like for instance, we have a lot of IT projects where the vendor can either design a system or they can give an off-the-shelf system. So because there's that capability, if you're going to design a system, that means you are going to do the design and write the code, which means you have subcontractor opportunities. If you already have a software system, like for instance, if you buy Microsoft off the shelf, there isn't a subcontracting opportunity there. So could be a vendor that proposes to design it, that have participation, and another vendor that proposed to use their software off the shelf. It still met the specs and requirements, so that was their compliance. So there could have been an award that did comply because they had good faith effort. So compliance meant that they either had part of the goal or showed good faith effort. Now the data change is because your program for race and gender conscious items have to be based on recent data, and it has to be based on a legally defensible disparity study. So the last disparity study, because at that point we only had an SBE program, and one of the requirements is that you have to exhaust race and gender neutral initiatives before you can do any race and gender conscious initiatives. So the 2014 disparity study looked at our progress with that small business program and says you can expand your small business program to include aspirational MBE goals. This current study looked at what we had implemented before and said we still had not moved the needle enough to match what the market is. So here's some additional changes that we feel might be progressive in what you're trying to do.
Right, good. And I do get that, I understand it. So we're really doing two things. We're increasing the percentages, and then we're also increasing the aspiration of trying to make that more concrete, not aspirational, but actual documented, showing that we have in fact met the requirements that are now have increased really from the 23% to the 41%. And just tightening it, I guess, is what it sounds like I'm hearing. Making it more.
Yes, it's a progressive process. So you're building upon what we've done before, I guess is the.
All right, I know there's time for other questions down the road. So thank you for that.
Okay.
So you want, make sure I have my homework assignment correct. Tailor down the bullet to.
Correct. And then we'll ask some questions, and those can be either answered via email or in the next session that we have together.
Okay.
Whatever works best. So, okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions before Ms. Lockett leaves? Okay. No, I want to thank you for your time. And I mean, one thing can be said is you certainly have a thorough understanding of what it is we're trying to do here, and that is very helpful. Can't always say that about everybody, but we can say that about you, and I feel very comfortable with your knowledge and your commitment with this moving forward, that we'll make sure that this is done properly, and we'll meet again then, okay?
Okay.
All right, thanks so much for your
Thank
time.
you very much.
Okay, all right. With that, is there anything else before committee?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Miller?
I would just like to commend you, Mr. Chairman, for conducting an excellent meeting and taking us through some really big-time legislation for 2 hours.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. With that, then I will make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay, and the ayes have it. We will adjourn at 12:04 p.m.